Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the latest series of RIB CostX Coffee Break webinars. My name is Amirul Izzat, and I am a CostX consultant in RIB software. As mentioned on the screen, this video will be covering the topic of measurement for cable installation works. For those of you who don't know CostX, basically CostX is a fully integrated measuring and estimating solution with universal applications supporting everything from hand-drawn sketches to PDFs, 2D and 3D, as well as the BIM files. RIB CostX is basically available in a variety of features levels depending on the size of your business and your estimating requirement as well. RIB CostX offers a quick and easy on-screen measurements that can be live linked to the inbuilt comprehensive workbooks to save your time. At the same time, will be eliminate errors. We have a several strength point why the industry need to choose RIB. Firstly, because of it is aligned with the upward trend of the BIM technology adoption. CostX does support quantifications from 3D or BIM model, at the same time able to do quantifications from the 2D drawing as well. Talking about the estimating part, most users nowadays are very familiar with Excel spreadsheet. This is where we remain a similar concept with Excel alike, known as CostX Workbook, which can create a live link to the drawing supported by a detailed repositories of data to make sure all the pieces of information could be accessed from one place. Then we have a concept of revisions tracking, including the capability to compare one drawing to another drawing to witness what is the differences. And we could keep it as a several version. So it will be a much easier when we need to track several revisions by creating the revisions trail. Finally is the customizable report where RIB Cost X was embedded with a report writer functions that can translate from whatever working data that we have into a professional report. As you can see, there are huge variety of import and export files types supported by RIB CostX to give compatibility with other applications as we want your processes to be as smooth as possible. Our latest webinars covers the uses of RIB CostX to do auto revisioning where we have several versions of design so that at the end of the day we could generate a report that can compare one version to another version. To view this webinar, you can simply visit our RIB software website or you just can simply look for us on our YouTube page. It will be much appreciated if you can subscribe to our channel so that you can get a notification every time we have a newly launched videos in the future. So this month webinar will be a bit different in terms of the context where we will focusing on the measurements for the cable installation works. So there are several areas that we will going through in this session. It started with drawing calibration checking. Then we will do some filters in terms of the drawing layers. Then we will see how we can save the view and we will do a dimension settings. Then we will going through the measurements that involve length as well as the count measurement, and we will see how all the quantities that we got and we can drag it into a workbook so that it will create a live link quantities. And finally we will see how we can build a rates that we can do pricing in our workbook. Okay, now we going to open up the software itself. So basically this is the software of CostX. If you can look from the screen, I already imported the two drawings, which is I do it in advance so that uh, I can save the time. So this is why I import it in the first place. So the first types of drawing, which is I'm using the format of the CAD drawings. So normally if we are using the CAD drawings, we can have the what we call as the ratio information. Normally the CAD drawing will indicate ratio, like what is the scale that we are using. So basically the first thing that we need to check after we import the drawing is the scale, whether we using the right scale or not. So in this case, we don't have any informations related to the scale. However, if I double click from the properties here showing that we are using the scale, which is 1:1. So normally, when we directly imported the drawing from the CAD drawing, it will use whatever the scale that already set from the original CAD drawings, and it depends on the drafter itself. If the drafter set it to 1:1 or 1:10 or whatever numbers of the ratio, then we will use whatever the ratio here. However, if let's say the drawing showing you any scale about the ratio, so this is where we can change the settings. What is the ratio that we're going to use for this particular drawing? Okay, so basically this is the first thing that we need to check. The next one is the sample or the drawings that I import is basically using the scan PDF copy, which is we don't have any layers available here. So and at the same time we don't have any to show you the scale, like from one end to another end is how long it is. So in this case, what we can do is to using our logic, whether is it logic from one point to another point, um, whether is it logic to use whatever measure distance that we have here. So in this case, the best that we can use, the best reference is to see from one workplace to another workplace. For example, like I'm going to take this is one considered one workspace, and I drag it into another one workspace, which is you can show that actually it is 0.022 meters. It's about like 22 mm, right? So in this case, for sure, it's not logic. So it means that we need to calibrate it to use the right calibrations figure. Okay, so we have another tools, which is the calibration tools that we can use to recalibrate our drawings to make sure that we are using the right calibration value. So in this case, since that we are going to use the calibration y-axis, so from one end to another end is showing you that the measured distance is 21 mm, which is not correct. So I believe instead of 21 mm, supposed to be it is if we change the decimal place, it should be like maybe 2 meters is much more makes sense to me. So this is where I will move this point, this decimal point, to make it the actual measurements from this point to another point here is at least 2 meters. So for me is I will go to replace this decimal point. I'm going to use 2182, which is I will put the decimal place here. So I would say that the actual measurement is 2 meters or 2182 mm is much more makes sense. So I just click OK. Then we need to go and measure distance one more time, whether from one place, one workspace to another one workspace is about like 2 meters, so it is much make more sense. Okay, so this is how we can check or we can calibrate our drawing. If we don't have any reference about the calibration, this is the best thing that we can do. Right, so now I since that we already check our calibration, this is where we can go to the next process. We need to identify what is the items that we going to do the quantity takeoff. So in this case, if we look at this CAD drawing, basically we have, let's identify what is the item that we're going to quantify. So we have a orange line indicates the EMT conduit, right? We have the green line, then we have the pink line showing you the cable tray, then we have another green line here. All right, then after that we also have the blue triangle to show you that we have the input and output switch point. Okay, this is also very important, and we need to quantify this point as well. So the next is we need to work out with the layers. Then because of there's others like image or the drawing as well, other layers as well. So we want to facilitate the process of we do quantity takeoff. So it is very recommended if we can filter, we can take out we make it hidden which of the unrelevant image or unrelevant the cat lines here, we make it hidden. So only the things that we want to quantify, we want to make it visible, right? So in this case, I'm going to make it hidden first for the line or for the layers that I'm going to use it for my quantity takeoff purposes. So I'm going to click for the orange line. Okay, basically orange line will be one of the things that I want to do quantity takeoff. And for my green line, then we go for the pink for the cable tree. Then we have another uh, green line here. Okay, then after that we have the blue triangle showing you 1 point. So this is where I'm going to going to make it um, hidden. Then what happens is that since that we already untick, okay, then this is where we can use the button invert. Basically the invert button is going to like a flip off. It's going to change, it's going to flip everything that we untick now is already become tick. So when I go to click invert, then only the things that I untick just now is become hidden. That is the another trick or another tips that we can make the process of filtering layers is much more quicker and much more easier. So since that we already filter the drawing, this is where we can go and click save as a save view. Okay, so in this case, since that we only have a one view, so which is this is the things that we're going to do the quantity takeoff later on. So I just click insert. So well, since that we already have a one views that we already save. So every time that, let's say if we click the show all, so without we need to go the same process of the filtering again, so why not we just can go to this particular views and click the save views. We already did it in the first place. Then when we click it, then it goes back to the view that we already saved just now. Okay, now, so this is where we can go and do some quantity takeoff. It's a quantity takeoff time. So before I do that, I need to establish some dimensions that related to the items that we're going to do the quantity takeoff. Okay, so in this case, we need to identify, since that we already identify the lines and the indicators showing you a different items. So the first thing is go to this particular dimensions and click this plus sign, and I'm going to create the first one, which is I put it as a cable tray. Okay, so cable tray is basically the pink colors showing the cable tray. And the folder, I'm going to, since that we already have 00 general, so in this case I'm going to create another folder, which is 00 telecommunication. This is where we need to the purpose of the videos that we create here is for the telecommunication. And for the measurement time, I will put a length, because of at the end of the day the quantities that we require is the running meters to show you how long is the cable tray. So for the positive dimensions and negative dimensions, for the colors, I'm going to change a bit because I don't like it green, because of I love to choose a color that have showing you the contradict, so that it is much clearer in terms of the visibility. So I think since that we have orange colors, we have pink, we have green, then I think the best is to choose yellow, so it will showing you the contradiction. So now I click insert. Then for the second item, it will be now we have the cable tray. Then after that we need to have the EMT conduit, right? So I can see that the EMT conduit showing you all these colors. Okay, the orange colors, the green is basically the EMT conduit, right? And the same thing, I go and click add sign, and in this case I put it as EMT conduit. The folder I'll put under telecommunication, then the measurement type will be length, and the default will be length. And the positive dimension, I will create, I will be using the same thing, which is yellow, right? And click insert, right? Okay, the next one is the input and output switch point, IO switch point, which is this blue triangle. Okay, so this is where the unit of measurement might be a bit different because of you're going to use the count measurement. So in this case, I put it input, output, uh, switch point, and the folder on telecommunications to the measurement type will be using count, and the default display will be count as well, and the positive dimensions going to choose a bit different. I'm going to use the same one, which is maybe we can use a bit different colors because we have the blue. So what is the colors that showing a bit contradict with the blue? So we have the lime, the light green, aqua. So maybe I'm going to use a bit lighter color. I'm going to use the orange. Okay, so I'm just click OK and click insert. So now I have the input and output switch point. Then before we do the measurement here, don't forget we have another drawing which is showing the UTP installation sample here. So we have the UTP cable as well. So why not we directly create the dimensions, and later on this must be easier for us to do the quantity takeoff part. So in this case I will put it UTP cables, and the measurement type will be the same as length, and the default will be length. Positive dimensions, I'm going to use the yellow as well. Click OK and click insert. Now we have the 4 dimensions. Now let's proceed to do the quantity. Okay, let's go back to the first drawing here. Okay, now I'm going to do the process of cable tray, which is the pink line is showing you where is the cable tray is. So to point it, we have a 2 types, whether we want to use a line or we want to use the point. Okay, so in this case, if let's say we are using the line, it is because of we are using the CAD drawing, so we have the layers available. So it is much easier for us to point directly by using the line, which is highlighting the layers itself. So I just click it, okay, and click it second one and the third one, and direct and all the way until to the end of this cable tray. Now I have a 44.25 meter for the cable tray. Okay, now let's go to the next element, which is the EMT conduit. So the EMT conduit is basically all the lines here except for the blue triangle. But this is where I think is the best is to use the point, which is I'm going to point all of the colors here. So I'm going to use point from this point. Then we just need to press our control on the keyboard. Don't forget about it because of we want to make sure there is a continuity. Okay, so when I press the control, so you can see that it is continuous. Okay, so that we can create like one single dimension. So now I have one, then we go for the next one, which is this one. Got this particular line here. Here you go. Then we have from this point to this point, then just make sure it's continuity by pressing control on your keyboard until here. So since that it is like a continuous, so directly we just can, you know, we can directly run through it. Okay, because of it is part of the EMT conduit as well. Go from this point until to, okay, then we just make sure that it is, okay, make sure it is continuous directly to this point. Okay, so each of these particular line we need to draw the EMT conduit. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to pause my video for a while so that I will do the rest of the lines so that we can save our time. I will pause for a while. Okay, we are back. So you can see that from this drawing, I had already draw all the dimensions, all the EMT conduit dimensions in each of these particular lines. So I have about like 207 meters, the quantity here. Okay, the next one is to point it the input and output switch point, I/O switch point. It will be a bit different because of we're going to quantify each of these blue triangle to get it the quantity, how much is it. So it is quite impossible for me to point it like one by one. So this is where I'm going to use the functions of auto count. So to make sure that the quantity takeoff is being done correctly and precisely, this is where we need to filter the drawing again to make sure that only this particular blue triangle will be visible. So I'm going to go to the layers here, and I'm going to click show all for a while, then just only filter only this blue triangle. Okay, so that I click invert, then only showing you only the input and output switch point only. So this is where we can go back to this particular drawings and drew the quantity takeoff for the IO switch point. So I'm going to use the auto count function where I'm going to capture the image only this blue triangle, and it detected accordingly. So I'm going to do next to click search. So what happens is that it will run through the entire drawing and look to do the quantity takeoff automatically to detect like how many numbers of this the blue triangle. So this is where we go and runs through, okay, how much is detected, like 148 numbers. So we can play around with this, the lower that I set it or the higher I set it, the percentage, right? It will be like much more strict in terms of detecting. If I put like 100%, it's only detected only a few. So I need to reduce down a bit in terms of the percentage so that it will detect it like, you can see that if I set it into 92%, so that seems like everything will be detected accordingly. So what I can do is that I just go and glance through and check generally whether it is detected correctly or not. It seems like everything's fine. It detected 148 numbers. Simply just need to click save accepted. Okay, and go back to the dimension groups. You can see that now it's automatically pointed by using auto count functions. It's only 148 numbers. Okay, we go next, which is the UTP cable, which I'm going to use a different drawing this time. So for our UTP cables, it's basically is to quantify how much cable that we need, how long it is from the server rack until to the IO switch point. So I'm going to use the UTP cable. So since that we are using the drawing and the drawing is in, I would say, scan PDF, means that we don't have any layers that available on this. So only the available to use is only point, which is we cannot use line because we don't have any layers available for this particular drawing. So I'm going to use point. So the same concept, which is we make sure that we need to make it continuous from from one line to another line. Okay, so make sure that we are using okay, make sure you need to make sure that we there's a continuity there. So maybe I just draw one more time. We make sure that we're using the right point here. Go dimensions using the same point. So from here to here, okay, to make sure that it is continuous. Okay, from this until to this particular switch point. Then we have another one from this point. I can make sure the continuity is there here until here. So now we have a two dimension. We have a two different cables, and the total is 24.37 meters. So now I have finished to do quantity takeoff. Okay, here is another one. It's like a tips. If let's say we are dealing with the EMT conduit. So since that we are dealing, each of the 2D drawings here is only allowed us to view it from the top plan view, right? It means that all these things is in a horizontal manner from one point to another point. So if let's say you are dealing with EMT conduit, which is in a vertical point, okay, it means that your EMT conduit here need to be in vertical. So if let's say we have two types, one is horizontal, which is you can view it clearly from the top plane. Then another one we have a vertical, which is the vertical point. If we look from the top plan is only like a one dot, but actually it is a vertical point, which is vertical we cannot see from the top plan view. So I'm going to do is that I'm going to copy this dimension group, and I'm going to put it some remarks here. Maybe I put like a vertical here, and don't need to copy dimension, just click OK. So we have a 2 1, which is the vertical. So instead of, I'm going to use length is much more on the horizontal, but in this case I'm going to change it to count because of we are dealing with a vertical. However, for the default display is still remain the length because of, yeah, even though that it is vertical, so the measurement type will be in count, but the quantity should be in length as well. However, in terms of the measured dimensions, okay, the length, you can see that now we have modifications. We have the expressions that showing you that count, it will times with the height. Right? So this is where the length quantity will comes from. So it means that we need to key in the height here, okay, so that we can get the total running meters of the vertical structure or vertical cables. So default height is basically, if you look at, if you have any like cross sections drawing to indicate what is the height. So in this case, I just assume it will be like 3.5 because of normally the floor height will be 3.5. So I'm just assume that going to be 3.5, and I just pick update. Yes. Okay. So maybe in this case we have vertical, right? Maybe like at the end of the point, maybe we have 1 point that for the vertical point, right? Vertical. So this is where we can point it 1, for example, right? For the vertical. So you can see that now vertical, even though it is a point, but actually it comprises the length of 3.5 because of the count. The formula that we already said just now is the length times with the height. So 1 times 3.5 will get the height. Let's create another one. Maybe at the end of this point, we have another point. We just put it another point here. So we have one more, which is another one, which is 3.5 meters. Okay, so when we go to these particular dimensions, right, maybe we should highlight only the vertical point. Okay, so it is possible that we still can view it, or we change whatever the height for this particular individual item. For example, like in this case, only this particular vertical cable is not using 3.5. We just can double click and we can change the height accordingly. Maybe we don't want to use the default height 3.5. Maybe these particular vertical cables have a different height, so we can we can just untick this default and use whatever the custom values here. Okay, basically there's another tips if let's say you are dealing with a vertical point. Okay, now end of the vertical point, let's go back to these drawings. Let's go back to these particular views and showing you everything. Okay, let's click telecommunications. You can see that now all these dimensions is already take off successfully. So the next part is I'm going to explain of how we're going to drag all these informations, all this quantity take off to the workbook. So okay, let's move to the workbook section. Okay, so in this particular workbook, if I need to create another example of the workbook, okay, just go and make sure you add the workbook ribbon toolbar and click this plus sign. So in this case, maybe I just put my workbook name will be schedule of quantities and click insert. So we will create another set of new workbook. So whatever the quantity takeoff that we had, we did in our dimension view just now. So this is where we can drag all those things, all these dimensions. We can drag it into this particular workbook just by simply drag and dropping. And if you want to apply rounding, yes, I want to apply rounding. Just click OK, then everything will be dragged from the drawing itself. So if let's say if I want to go and check where the quantity comes from, if let's say the cable tray is 44 meters, so I have a mountain I have a function which is I can click the show source. So it going, when I click the show source, it will tell me, you will go back to the dimension viewpoint or the drawing itself to show you where the quantity comes from. Okay, let's go back to the schedule of the quantities here. So the next one is I'm going to explain on how we can create the rates for the installation work. So let me delete this zero first. Now we have the cable tray, which I'm going to drill down to another level of the rate here. So this is where I'm going to key in the product cost as well as the labor cost. Okay, so the product cost will be like a quantity, will be in meter. So if we look at this additional informations, we have the cable tray, which is the product cost is 3,281, but basically this cost is for 2.4 meters. But at the end of the day, what we want is we want to get is a meter. It means that the calculation wise, I need to divide it from each from whatever the cost, I'm going to divide it 2.4 so that we can get the quantity is per meter. So the rate, let me put it 3,281, 3,281. So this is where I can use the factor here because of whatever the rates or whatever the total here is basically for 2.4 meters. But since that we're going to use it to translate it into per meter, so this is where I'm going to divide it to 2.4 meter. This is where I'm going to modify a bit in terms of the factor. So the factor is will be like 1 over 2.4 so that I can get the factor, so that I can, whatever the rates here, I can times with the factor, which is now the total has been reduced for meters instead of 2.4 meter. And for the labor cost, it should be like per lot, which is now the total is 350 for the labor cost. It'll be like 350. So the factor, um, we don't need to rationalize it because we don't have is a per lot for each of these cost 350. I'm sorry about it because of we also need to divide it 2.4 meters because of the cost here is for 2.4 meter. So this is where I'm going to create the same thing, which is 1 over 2.4. So we have total of 145.83, which is for quantity is for 1 meter. So now I have the rate is 1,512. So all this will be bring to the first level, which is 1512. So now for the EMT conduit, right? So we have another function which is the EMT conduit, but we need to be very careful because of this product cost and labor cost is per 3 meters run. It means that if you want to create for meters, we need to use the factor here to convert it to make sure that we are using the right cost per meter. So I'm going to use it product cost. This the quantity should be per meter, and the rate will be 550, 550. But we need to using factor because of should be 3 meters run. So this is where I'm going to 1 over 3. So now I have the cost per meter as well as the labor. So the labor is as well for 3 meter. It means that whatever that we got here, we need to rationalize it to 3 meters. 120. So the factor will be 1 over 3. So now we can get the quantity correctly, which is the rate is 223 per 33. Okay, so for the vertical, it will be the same thing. So I just need to go and duplicate it using the same thing 223.33. Okay, so basically that's how it works. Okay, and if let's say we're going to use the same UTP cables, so instead of we're going to use the same price, okay, which is 223.33 for the UTP cables. So instead of I'm going to copy this one to this one, we also can use another alternative, which is we can save this one as a one standard in our library. It just means that we right click and we just need to copy it to the rate library, and we need to choose what of the library that we want to save it. In this case, I'm going to use the project rates, and the item code is basically is a code that we need to establish it so that every time we bring that code, it will use whatever the values contained in that particular code. So in this case, we use it EMT dash conduit this is the item code, and the description, this is the description. So I just put it as a general I, IEMT conduit, and the rate uh, will be generate from the details that we already key in just now, and click insert. So now if you look at this particular rates, now I have inside my project's rate, now I have the EMT conduit, which is 223. So this is where I can just simply drag it, okay, from the library. Then I just drag it until here and just use whatever the rate and click update. So you can see that it's the same thing. So if let's say we have like a lot of same thing that going to use the same price, so this is where we can just basically change from this particular rates library. If let's say I have the fluctuations of the cost, I have a different material price every month or every quarter, so I just need to change whatever my product cost here. Then all those things, all the rates that has been live linked to this particular schedule of rate will be updated accordingly automatically, without we need to relink it again. So there's one of the advantage if we can use the rates library here. Okay, so basically that's how it works. So another tips is I want to highlight here is basically about this particular length of UTP cables. Some of the situation which is instead of the length, the total length, sometimes it's required the average length, okay, because of the price will be priced according to average length, because of you can see that each of the cable from the server rack until to this particular point have a different length. So what happened is that some of the schedule of rate or some of the BQs, they require the average length from the server rack to this particular area. They need to have like a we need to identify what is the average length, and the price can be priced according to the average length. So another tip is that we want to divide the length according to the how many numbers, how many unit that we have automatically, then we get the average length. So I just simply put it like UTP cables in bracket average length. Okay, so before I do anything, I just drill down to another quantity. Okay, and I'm going to drag the same point again, which is the EMT conduit here. Go to this particular length, click update. So you can see that the EMT conduit, so we have a 20 sorry, it's not going to be EMT conduit but the UTP cable. Going to drag it to the length here and click update. Right, so we have a 24.38 meters, but this one is basically is a total length, it's not an average. So it means that we need to divide this length into how many cables available there. If let's say in this case, what we can do is that we can drag the same one to this particular factor, but instead of length we can use the count, so that when we update it will be uh, divide to these two. But in this case the default is times 2, so it means that we need to have a certain modification in this particular formula, which is now I need to key in 1 over whatever the x get count. All right, so it will be change it into the formula has been suit with the divide instead of time. So now I have the average is 12.19. So what happens is that if let's say we have several cables, let me draw another few cables. Let's say I have additional 2 cables, which is from here. I will going to draw okay one more cables, maybe until here. It will link to this particular switch point. Now I have 3, and let's try to draw another one, which is from here. Okay, we have okay, we try to draw one point here, which is at this time will be until to this particular point. So now we have basically we have 4 cables. When we go to this particular scheduled quantity, we have that the total is 51, and it will divide with 0.25 because of it. The unit is 4, and we have 1 over 4. Then the factor is 0.25, and now we have the quantity 12.75. Then we go back, you can see that now we have the average length, which is 13 meters. So this is another trick or another tips of how we going to get the quantity okay, from whatever the total length, and we can also get the quantity in terms of the average by simply using the factor line here, which is we need to modify a certain formula to make sure that the quantity here that we have is divide instead of times. Okay, so basically that's how it works. And in terms of the overhead as well as the profit, this is where the user can use this factor at the first level here to mark up like how many overhead or how many profit they want to get, and automatically it will get the total here. So maybe in this case I put like 10%, I just put like 1.1, so now the quantity or the total will be included 10% markup here. Okay, so basically, I hope more or less it's explained how the quantity works. Um, okay, with that, I think I already reached at the end of the session of this webinar. Again, I really hope that you guys have overall ideas and have a good takeaway from this session. Thanks a lot for your time in attending this webinar. Hope to see you guys for in the future webinar. Okay, thanks a lot. Have a nice day.